for Denny Hastert, but unprecedented persecution of the press and others. Wayne Madsen.
Well, I mean, we're getting into the 2016 presidential race, so we're going to probably see a lot more of this. Of course, Hastert's not a candidate, but somebody who basically defended this activity is a candidate. And I would just cite that at the time that I made these reports in October of 2006, the St. Petersburg Times on October 4th, 06, it's now the Tampa Bay Times, reported on the knowledge of top Florida Republicans, including then Governor Jeb Bush and Attorney General Charlie Crist, who was then a Republican, about the Foley-Hastert scandal in Washington. And this is a quote from the St. Pete Times. In a gaggle with Florida's Capitol Press Corps Wednesday, Governor Jeb Bush flatly refused allegations posted on an internet website and circulated widely Tuesday that claims Bush, Attorney General Charlie Crist, and Florida Department of Law Enforcement were all told by the Federal Justice Department about Mark Foley's emails a year ago, but covered it up. The alleged conspiracy, sourced to informed sources in Tallahassee who were not named, was reported on the Wayne Madsen Report website. Madsen's website claims to tackle the politically incorrect and politically embarrassing stories and holds government officials accountable for their actions. Bush responded to a question from the St. Pete Times reporter in Tallahassee about my report, and he said, if the next governor, referring to Charlie Crist, who was running for the seat, to succeed Bush, is going to have to respond to every blog and every tired little anonymous person who has some bitter part in their soul who wants to express it on the internet, it's not going to work, unquote. That was now presidential candidate Jeb Bush's comment on the Hastert-Foley scandal at the time. Why was he interested in covering it up?
Well, that's the word that going back, that it wasn't Reagan that had the call boys in there, that it was that it was George Herbert Walker Bush, yes. And that it goes all the way back to that. And that's what the Washington Times reported. Hundreds, wasn't it hundreds? In fact, we can pull the news article up, the scan of it, of the Washington Times. Wasn't it hundreds of times underage call boys were visiting after midnight? Well, there were reports that Bush was seen at these get-togethers in Nebraska where they would fly, in some cases, either fly child prostitutes in or get them out of Boys Town, the Roman Catholic famous orphanage outside of Omaha. Well, it also ties in, doesn't it, Wayne, to Penn State. I mean, we know Sandusky is in there raping people from this, troubled youth group at high noon on Saturdays. I mean, a field house on the weekend is a busy place. He certainly felt like he was safe. So here's the other question. Why are they now busting people when they've been good, helpful servants of Sauron? Well, I mean, it's the nature of Washington. That place will eat their own alive. And, it's just, it's getting worse and worse there because one thing about the Congress, they used to have statesmen. The worst thing you would catch them on is getting drunk in public or messing around with a prostitute of the opposite sex. I'm thinking, Wilbur Mills and Wayne Hayes and people like that. But nowadays it's getting into more of the illegal aspects, which is underage sex. But is that because it's a club? And just like in the mafia or street gangs, you've got to commit some horrible crime that people have to prove themselves and be compromised. Isn't that classic criminal psychology? Oh, I think it's a blackmail operation from the word go. Look at some of these people. We have David Vitter, the senator from Louisiana, now running for governor. I mean, he was paying prostitutes. He would soil his diaper, and then they would scold him and spank him and have to clean him up. I mean, what is the matter with a state that would elect an individual like that to be their U.S. senator? And it keeps coming out. What about the Senator Lindsey Graham? I mean, I've got it from a lot of Washington sources that he's really compromised. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I've said for a long time the GOP nowadays stands for, gray old perverts. And of course, I've had
people from the major newspaper in South Carolina, which is the state out of the capital, Columbia, say, why isn't anyone in Washington reporting on our pretty well-known gay senator, Lindsey Graham, who, by the way, publicly is anti-gay rights? But how many times have we seen that? Those who proclaim this the loudest. I mean, Rick Santorum, who announced the other day for the presidency, once again, he was a good friend of Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. And then, of course, you know, they all run from these guys after they get caught. As I'm sure many of them are saying about Hastert, they're saying Dennis who. The amazing thing is Hastert was third in line for the presidency. So think back to 9/11, and, you know, although we know that was an inside operation, but what if Bush had been harmed that day and Cheney became president? Then that would have made Hastert second in line for the presidency. That's pretty scary to know that somebody that blackmailed could have wound up in that.
Well, sure, but I mean, looking at Sandusky, looking at Hastert, it's not that they were fat. I mean, everybody can get fat. I've been overweight. They look like something's wrong with them. I mean, I wouldn't buy a car from them. I wouldn't associate with them. They look like deranged scum. And people say don't judge a book by its cover. No. I mean, quite frankly, you can judge people generally by looking them in the eye, shaking their hand, listening to them, and seeing how they act. I look at the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership. They look like a bunch of perverts. They look like a bunch of Jeffrey Dahmers. I mean, I'm sorry. They look like a bunch of scum. Right. And I mean, and you know, we're talking about Republicans, but I'm still not satisfied that Harry Reid damn near put his eye out as a result of an accident with his weight machine or treadmill or whatever it was. You know, that defies logic. What about Bush that kept getting beaten up and he had double black eyes and bloody lips? He'd say he fell down. I mean, that's not true. He was the one time he had the mark on his cheek was from pretzel. The time he choked on a pretzel, he said, but I heard he was very, very drunk that day. He was watching some football and passed out. So again, this for those of viewers and listeners who think Washington is a den of iniquity, I can tell you, tell them all it is. I've seen it firsthand. Why did they kill the D.C. madam? I mean, I know you knew her well. You helped get her on the show. What happened there? I mean, she wasn't talking, or are they just getting rid of loose ends? Well, she had some more information. She had documents she was about ready to release. We don't know what happened to that, by the way. She was seen removing a box of documents from a condo in Orlando and taking it to her mother's home in Tarpon Springs in Tampa Bay, Florida, and we don't know what happened to that. But there were other shoes that were going to drop in that matter. I know she was trying to get out of the U.S. and move to what was formerly East Berlin. She bought an apartment over there. I think for her it was a safe house, and I think it was a former CIA safe house because of the work she had done as a madam for the Central Intelligence Agency. Absolutely. She was probably with the Central Intelligence Agency officially, undoubtedly unofficially. So this is how they treat their own yet again. We'll be back. I want to move out of the whole blackmail system, unless he's got other points he wants to add, and get into ISIS. It's so transparent that ISIS is Western funded and being protected. And I see these headlines. Pentagon is tweaking their ISIS strategy. They don't know what to do. It's a Saudi Arabian proxy army taking over. The Iraqi government has testimony and video. I mean, we knew it before it even happened. We said that they were going to change the name to confuse the public. And then I want to get into just other general areas. But before we do that, Wayne, you were talking about the climate getting crazier. The self-destructiveness, the starting stuff with China, the starting stuff with Russia. Nobody's lionizing those countries, but it seems like the elite really are bravado, chutzpah-driven, and it really is scary, you know, covering D.C., being up in D.C., off and on between Florida. What is the climate? Where do you expect Obama to go in his last year and a half in office? The executive power grabs, I mean, all of it, the Republicans rolling over to everything, but still being indicted. What are the Democrats thinking, and who's in charge? Well, I think Obama would like to speed up the clock and be out of office a lot sooner.
I noticed he was pretty listless when he spoke yesterday at the National Hurricane Center in Miami about everybody getting prepared for the hurricane season. I just had the impression he would have he seemed like he wanted to be somewhere else, anywhere but at the National Hurricane Center, telling Americans to how to go and access ready.com or ready.gov or whatever the website is. I think he's like other presidents. He's looking at his post-presidency. The museum and library are going to be in South Chicago with apparently a satellite facility in Hawaii.
He'll have his new money laundering operation foundation like the Clintons.
Or the Obama Foundation. I would hope he won't be as crooked as the Clintons have been with that. I mean, shaking down countries and companies for donations and then steering U.S. policy towards their favorite projects, which apparently is what Hillary was doing.
Well, she's cut and dry, having third world dictators give her money so she allows the State Department to authorize weapons transfers. This is the most criminal stuff you can imagine. Meanwhile, they're busting Hastert for covering up some wrestler, high school wrestler he buggered.
Well, they ought to bust all of them, in my opinion. There's very few in Washington who...
I agree, bust them all, but how does Hillary get away with it?
I mean, because they love her. She's look how they extol her. I mean, she's got two challengers for the Democratic nomination who don't get any press attention hardly, and when they do, it's sort of like, oh, these guys are also rans. Talking about Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley from Maryland, but this is how the media operates. When I broke that Hastert story, I commented on that because back in 2006, Anna Marie Cox, who was then Wonkette, if you recall that blog, this was her comment on my report on Hastert. She said, the problem is Wayne Madsen just makes S word up. We hear from well-placed sources that no one is having sex with Dennis Hastert. Well, I hope Ms. Cox likes her crow, even though it's served as a cold dish now. But I'm only as good as my sources, and in that case, not only were the sources people who knew about Hastert in northern Illinois in the Chicago area, but members of the gay community in Washington were very open about this guy and what a basically a hypocrite he was, supporting anti-gay rights, moves by the House, yet everyone knew that his own secret life,
Sure, and you could tell body language. You've seen him prancing around with his boyfriend.
Yeah, that was one where you had to be there. It was myself, my colleague, and Charlie Rangel. We just thought that was so odd that here is the Speaker of the House with a very, very young page. Normally, those guys are back in the office working, and he's acting like it's his chief of staff, his closest assistant. And, as I say, even Charlie Rangel looked over at that and, had that wry smile like, yeah, there he goes again.
Unbelievable. We're going to be back and get into ISIS, get into geopolitics and more with Wayne Madsen. I'm Alex Jones. Stay with us. Supreme Court to rule they can start taking private pension funds, and I see the very same banks doing it in every country they run. I'm here raising the alarm. I don't think of that as exceptional. But I guess it is, and I think that's why we're in so much trouble. It's exceptional that Wayne Madsen's broken so many big stories, I can't even count them. And what's even more exceptional is that you hardly ever hear about it in the mainstream media. There's some comments today going, yeah, Wayne Madsen said this in some major newspapers. Where are the apologies? Where are the apologies that I had guessed on, whistleblowers like Springman, about the CIA ordering known terrorists into the country before 9/11 and ordering the FBI to stand down? That's now in the 28 pages. It's now admitted. Where are the apologies from Glenn Beck and Fox News and all of them? They're never going to come. And it's not about me. It's not about Wayne Madsen. But it is about the truth and how it triumphs. And I know Wayne, because I know him well. He's a really good guy, even though he's not bragging. I'd imagine he's savoring, not on a power trip, but just savoring the fact that the truth outs. The truth ends up always surfacing. And that after all he's gone through, turning down bigger jobs, money,